found the more I opened my heart to music, the more doors just opened in front of me. It's like, I'm convinced that that's the trick, really, is that you got to open yourself to it.
Welcome to episode 74 of the Bass Shed podcast. My name is Ryan Roberts. Double bass players, everything you need for the double bass can be found at lemurmusic.com. Basses, bows, strings, sheet music, bass accessories, pickups, preamps, amps, bags, cases, everything you need for the double bass can be found lemurmusic.com. Use the promo code TheBassShed, all one word, for 10% off. Without a doubt, my favorite cables on the market are Tsunami cables. They come with a lifetime guarantee. That's right, buy the cable one time. Something goes wrong with it, talk to the folks over at Tsunami, they'll switch it out. Buy the cable once, buy a Tsunami cable, use the promo code TheBassShed, all one word, for 10% off. If you're like me and you bring upright and electric to the same gig, you're doing some doubling, check out the Trickfish Trilobite AB box and preamp. I love it. I use it all the time. Fantastic preamp. I also use their single channel preamp, the Minnow. I use that more for the home recording stuff that I do. But live, I use the Trickfish Trilobite exclusively. Check it out, trickfishamps.com. Use the promo code TheBassShed, all one word, for 10% off. Welcome to another installment of Live at Lemur. That's right, this episode was recorded in the showroom down at Lemur Music. There's also a video component to this episode that will be released shortly, along with the video of episode 71 of the Bass Shed podcast, which was my talk with Jimmy Jazz Prescott. I want to thank everybody down at Lemur for inviting me to partner with them on these episodes. There's a few more in the works. We're just sorting out schedules because, you know, the world's opening back up again and cats are hitting the road. So trying to figure out times that'll work for everybody. On the topic of the folks at Lemur being the best, they sent me a book. They mailed me a book titled Double Bass, The Ultimate Challenge. Now, if you are a listener of the Bass Shed podcast, you know I screw up last names all the time. Like, all the time. So here we go. I'm hoping... Like, I was doing practice runs on Jeff's last name. His first name's Jeff, the author of Double Bass, The Ultimate Challenge. Jeff Braditich. Like, I think that's right. But I don't know. Bradetich. Braditich. Jeff Braditich. Sorry, Jeff. I'm so sorry, man. The book Double Bass, The Ultimate Challenge. The books have never been my thing. Like, I don't really go through them cover to cover. I have. But that's not the best way I kind of get information, right? Like, I want to play, I want to do it, I want to feel it, I want all that. So books, they're not my preferred source of education, but I always find something useful in them. And so when the folks at Lemur sent me this book, I was like, okay, I'll check it out. And I started skimming through it immediately. I was blown away by how thorough this book is. It talks about everything, like everything. In such detail, but it's laid out, and the language in the book, it's also very approachable. So it actually feels like you're in a lesson with Jeff just by going through the book. I think it's amazing. Double bassists, if you're interested in checking out another method book, I highly recommend this, and that's coming from someone that does not regularly recommend method books. Again, the book is Double Bass, The Ultimate Challenge by Jeff Braditich. I really hope I'm getting that right. All right, on the episode is double bassist and luthier Jason Brown. I initially met Jason while hanging out at Lemur Music a few months back. Jason is the luthier at Lemur, and he was in the workshop working on a bass. When I met him, we started to chat a bit, and I was interested to hear from him on the podcast. Since I met Jason as a luthier, I kind of came in with some topics I wanted to discuss. I knew he was building C extensions for double basses, and I knew that he converts basses into flyaway basses. I was curious about all that, actually, the process of converting a bass to a flyaway bass. I'm glad we had time to discuss it. But just a few minutes before we started recording this, Jason mentioned that he had worked with Hank Williams III, grandson of country music icon Hank Williams. I was definitely interested and curious about that, so that's where our conversation starts, is how he met Hank 3 and some stories about the formation of the band and his time with the group. And here it is. Here's my talk with double bassist and luthier Jason Brown. Couple things I want to get into. You build extensions. You build this bass extension.
Yeah.
Cool. I want to talk about that. You also convert basses into flyaway basses.
Yeah.
I want to talk about that too. You just mentioned that you played with Hank 3.
Yeah.
I definitely want to know about that. How'd you get the gig? How'd that come about?
That was interesting. It was a long time ago at this point. I was his original bass player when he first set out to be Hank 3.
Okay.
Basically, it was about 1995. And I had gone to Branson, Missouri to fill in on bass for a friend's band that lost their bass player. And I always wanted to check it out because I've heard about Branson as being kind of interesting. And I've always sort of been into old country.
Yeah.
And Branson's the place where a lot of the old stars decided instead of touring, they would build a theater and have their fans come to them and kind of relax.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
So it was an interesting format, and the town itself was absolutely full of some amazing talent. I mean, just like people that are like done being on the road. They want to live a normal life, and you kind of can in Branson. You can go like clock into your theater job, and you do your matinee show. And literally, the theaters have time clocks for the musicians, some of them, and you leave your stuff on stage, pays really well, and it's super comfortable because the theaters are posh. It's like a little Vegas,
Okay.
So I wound up there, and at the same time, Hank 3 had just began his show, and Willie Nelson lent him a theater.
Okay.
Like that he had a theater that he bought years ago and just, I guess, wasn't using, and it was kind of down the hill off the strip, and at that time, right before I went there, I'd been touring with NoFX as their guitar tech, because they're friends of mine. And I went out and did that, and it was really interesting and fun. But so when I'm in Branson, I ran into Hank at the bar, at the club I was playing at.
Yeah.
And he was like, stood out, because Branson's fairly like conservative looking people and older people. And then here's this young guy, he's 21 years old, and he had that long hair and trippy dude. And then someone introduced me to him. It's like, this is Hank Williams' grandson and stuff. And I'm wearing a NoFX shirt, and he's like, you like punk rock, man? I'm like, oh yeah, totally. And so we just became friends right away. And so it turns out he had an electric bass in his band. He didn't quite have the band formed yet that he was envisioning.
Yeah.
So he's like, you want to play in my band? And I'm like, so sure, what should I do? And he goes, just learn a bunch of Hank Williams songs. And
all right.
So I'm like, sounds good. And I went and bought Hank Williams' 40 Greatest Hits, like the CD.
Yeah.
And I knew who he was, but I hadn't ever really dove into his music. So I started listening to that, and I literally was hooked. I was like, damn, this is good.
Yeah.
It's like amazing. And I always thought Hank Williams died when he was older. I just didn't know the details. And then I learned he died when he was 29. And
really?
I'm like, holy crap, this guy changed music and made this kind of mark in that short period of time.
Yeah.
And so I was really, kind of infatuated by it. And Hank 3 turned out to be a really cool guy, and we became good friends. And when the Branson, the band came together, we had a real lineup that looked like Hank Williams. Hank 3 wore his dad's nudie suit back when his dad was young.
Yeah.
And it used to fit him because Hank 3's really skinny.
Yeah.
But Hank Jr. was too. Like when you look at really old pictures of him, he looked a lot more like his dad.
Okay.
So our show was real legit. Hank 3's wearing the nudie suit. We had a steel player, and we had a fiddle player from the Hank Jr. band. And now we had the upright bass in there, and the whole thing just kind of came together. And it was weird as the curtain would open, and our audience would be 80 years old, just total blue hairs and everything.
Right. Like original Hank fans.
Yeah. And some of them had tickets, we autographed this ticket. This is from a Hank Williams senior show.
Yeah.
And he'd be signing that stuff. So it was just kind of a mind-blowing experience, and that it was all opposite. the way his career started, he started with really old fans, and we worked our way towards young fans, as opposed to like starting with young fans and growing old with them or something.
Yeah, exactly. That's a normal trajectory.
And it was a real trip. So when that show wound up, we did that matinee and the evening show in Branson for like the rest of the season.
Okay.
And then Branson's seasonal. Like they have when the weather's good, there's shows. And then there's like a Halloween little period, and then they have a little Christmas period, but it's not enough really. And, basically the season's over. So he moved back to Nashville, and I moved back there with him. And we started practicing and building the band. And then first thing was a tour to Japan.
Okay.
And that was really cool. And at the time, I didn't know what I was going to do because I was like, his show wasn't really off the ground yet.
Yeah.
We weren't working, and I was like, barely had any money. And so I went to Gibson, because I do Luthier, and they hired me for the custom shop.
Okay.
And I was like, cool, I had to do all these tests and stuff. But it looked really cool, because it's Gibson guitars, and then it's the special part inside of it where they did the really cool stuff. So right when I was about to get hired, Hank goes, "We got a tour in Japan." And I was like, "Sorry, custom shop." I'm kind of waiting to do this music thing.
Yeah.
And so I just stayed with him, and we went to Japan, and we played like the Blue Notes in Japan, which was totally bizarre because those are all, typically jazz clubs.
Sure.
And that was the beginning of it.
How was that music received? I mean, something that is so American. How is that received in Japan?
What I would call a typical Japanese fashion, which means unbridled enthusiasm for things they like.
Yeah.
Like it was, I met Japanese cowboys. They had like holsters for their cell phones. They had like, Western shirts.
Yeah.
They were clearly fans. They weren't just like, coming out of curiosity to see something. They were invested. They were there. They knew why they were there. And it was an amazing experience. It was really cool.
After Japan, did you keep working with Hank 3 in the States?
Yeah, I ended up doing that for about 7 years.
Oh, wow.
And just became he had an interesting start, and it was rough. It was all backwards. Everything was always backwards with what I would say that whole experience. Like we got this super old school manager named Jack McFadden, who was like the last of the cigar chewing, sits behind a big desk, ball buster, and so he was Hank's manager, and he had an amazing legacy. It was McFadden. Owens McFadden was the name of his first company, and that was Buck Owens and Jack McFadden. Okay. And their first artist was Merle Haggard. Okay. And those guys really put the Western, like Bakersfield sound on the map.
Yeah.
And everybody thought, oh, Jack would be perfect for Hank. He's old school and gets this stuff. And they didn't connect at all. It was really just from the get-go, it went south. And like Jack was like, "We're going to get you on the radio. I got all these songs from writers that you'll like," and he was picturing producing Hank 3 more to be get some hits on the radio and just do what he knew how to do.
Right.
And Hank 3's like, "I don't want to do that, man. I hate these songs." He goes, "I got you a deal on Curb Records." He's like, "I hate Curb Records." And it just was like that from the get-go. There was no understanding between them.
Sure.
But then Jack made me the band leader, which was interesting because he saw that I knew what I was doing in that realm, and he liked the bass, and I was just always kind of straightforward about it. And I had a connection with Hank that was really made it accessible for him through me.
You could be the middleman and like speak both people's language.
Which was a terrible place to be.
Yeah.
It was
they're fighting,
no-win situation because if he'd try to call Hank and Hank wouldn't answer, so he'd call me, and I'm like, now I'm stuck. If I don't get him in touch, he's mad, and if I do, he's mad.
Sure.
So it's like real fast I realized it wasn't the best, but it was interesting.
Okay.
It was a good spot to be in ultimately, but as far as experiences go, but it wasn't.
Did you do some records with Hank 3?
Did I what?
Did you do some records with him?
Yeah. I played on all the first records, which was an interesting experience too, because they did the standard Nashville thing, like where they, but by standard, I mean, I think this is how the formula usually goes, is that you have a new artist that, like in Hank's case, he's got a name. A lot of new artists aren't even known yet. Sure. They just take a chance, and so they don't usually use like the artist's band, like this guy just moved here from Oklahoma. He could really sing. you know, he's getting the deal. His band isn't. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
And it's like, so they'll demo the guy's songs if he has a catalog of good stuff already, or they're already performing. But usually they'll bring in the producer's favorite guys, which are all the A-Team in Nashville. You know, the big names.
Sure.
That are
just
on
guys that can knock it down.
All the records, you can grab any of the hits and go, they're those guys, you know. So they did that with us. They brought in the road band because we were already out touring and had a bunch of songs, and then they brought in some new songs, and we demoed all the stuff, and then they brought in the A-Team. And I was like, oh, well, it sucks. I wanted to be on it. But then they called me and they go, hey, do you want to play on this record? We like the way you played better.
Great.
And I was like, yeah. So then I was like, on all this stuff after that, which was great. And then everyone else was all these A-Team guys, you know, like Rob Jacobs on the fiddle, Greg Morrow on the drums, on a lot of them. We had like Red Volkart brought in on the guitar from Haggard. And by the second record, I got to bring in most of the players I wanted. So we got away from the more generic A-Team Nashville sound, and we got guys that I was used to playing with that had much more of an identity sound, you know, like Red. It's just an amazing Telecaster player. We had Johnny Paycheck, steel player, Big Jim Murphy. Jim Riley came in and played on drums from Rascal Flatts.
Nice.
Was on the road with us. And I got a lot of these guys on the road too, which was amazing. You know, they were like on the bus with us. And sweet. At one point I had Murph on steel, Red on guitar, Jim Riley on drums, Vernon Derrick on the fiddle from Hank Jr. And it was just an all-star band. It was just amazing. I mean, it's just like, it just melted faces. You know, it was such a blessing to play with. You know, and these guys were fun because they'd all been around and just like, they had stories, you know, from.
So, I mean, for 7 years, and at this point, you're really in the band. Like, you're really entrenched. Your spot is really, you're protected. You know, you're the middleman between Hank and the management. You're basically MD and picking the players. You're doing the records. What happened to make you not do the gig anymore?
Well, also Hank was my roommate finally at one point.
Oh, okay.
And so it was all Hank 24/7.
That's a lot.
We're on the road, and then because he had a real rough breakup with his gal of a long time. Okay. And it was another Jack McFadden thing. Jack's like, you got to get a house way out in the country so that no one messes with you, you know, because he had this idea like, you know, you be a big star and you live
far away.
remotely. You don't want to be in town. You want to be like special. And it's like a bad idea. So he put Hank like 40 miles out of town or something, you know, like way out on the outskirts in some town that was, you know, down the 40 to the east of Nashville miles. And then he had fallen out with his girl. And now he's living in this like trailer home on a bunch of land by himself in the sticks. Oh, man. And it just got really depressing, you know. And then his dog died, too. It was awful. His dog of many, many years, Baxter, I think it was like, we came home one day from a tour, walked in the door, like, because the bus always came and went from his house. Mm-hmm. So we'd park our cars there and the bus would come and pick us up. So we came in, unloaded all the crap, and I walked in with him. And it was an English bulldog or some kind of bulldog. And he walked up to us, said hi, got in his chair, and died. Like this one. Oh, like he was old. He just like his head, we saw his head drop. And Hank goes, Baxter. And that was it. The dog was gone. He like waited for him to get home. Wow. And then died. And then so he's like, let's bury him quick because it's like, I don't want him to get stiff. I remember him saying that. And I was kind of like, let's do that. So we go outside and we start digging this hole and it's like so sad. And then it starts raining. Oh my gosh. Like really hard. And then we hit this pipe. Like right where we chose to dig, there's this, we only made it about this deep and there's this fucking pipe. And it was just like, you could just see Hank's like, it's just like losing it, you know.
Yeah,
like, I was like, this is too sad. I was like,
like what else is gonna happen?
I'm like, go in the house. I'll make a new hole and we'll take care of this. And he did, and I finished up burying the dog. And, you know, had to start over where there probably wasn't a pipe. Yeah, right. But it was pretty sad. So he was all depressed and it sucked out there, and so he moved into my house because I lived in East Nashville. Okay, had a much different scene right in town. You
Sure.
know, my house was like,
you were in it.
Full of life, and you know, and it was like a cheerier place to be. So,
sure.
You know, and then he was in town, and much more easier. It's hard to go into town when you live 40 miles outside of town. You got to have a good reason, and you can't just run downtown and have a drink at the bar or something.
It's an event.
You know, yeah. So that worked out. But then I think what ultimately, after 7 years of everything, it was it got pretty, you know, a lot of intensity being Hank 3, I think, you know, because we were started as a Hank Williams band, basically, playing Hank Williams songs. Then we added some Hank Jr. stuff. Then we added some of Hank 3's rock stuff that he had written. And then became Ass Jack, which was like the death rock version of him. You know? And so the show kept evolving. And it was really cool as it did, but we never got rid of old songs almost ever. So the show started out 2 hours long or hour long, then it was 2 hours long, then it was 3 hours long. Pretty soon it's 3.5 hours long. We'd take an intermission right in the middle, and he'd warn people, we're going to take a break, and we're going to come back, and there's going to be a lot of FUs and stuff like that. You know, so if you're not into that kind of stuff, thanks for coming. And because we had a lot of old fans that were confused by it or offended even, you know, they were just like,
they came to hear one thing.
I didn't come to see this crap. What's this? So he was really good about giving them kind of two separate shows. Like, here's your genuine old school country show. And then we take a break, then we come back, and it's like definitely a mosh pit. It's a whole different show. And it was amazing chemistry. Like in Texas, I remember a lot of shows where we'd have like bull riders and punk rockers. And they just were like magnets to each other. You know, they're like lined up on both sides. Bull riders are like, let's get in that pit. You know? And they get knocked on their ass, and they'd knock people on their ass, and it was just like pretty spectacular to watch. You know? It's like interesting. But finally, it got like I met my wife. That's what really did things. And we were in Madison, Wisconsin, and we were on tour up there playing at the Barrymore. And Hank and I went to go get burritos, and there was this woman standing in front of us, and I like really thought to myself at the time, wow, that's the kind of woman that some lucky guy marries, you know? And I didn't think it was me. I mean, it was the last thought. It's like, some lucky guy. That's somebody else.
That's someone else's life.
Completely different. You know, I'm out here on the road like a bum, and can't afford a woman like that or whatever, you know. So ended up meeting her that night. Turned out she worked for the promoter and was in the theater. And we started hanging out, and we kept hanging out, and I've been married to her 22 years now.
Congratulations. That's very cool.
But at the beginning, it really interrupted our friendship with Hank 3. I think it was just like, then I made the bad idea of having her move into our house because she had just finished college. And we probably should have got our own house in retrospect.
That's a dynamic.
But it was already a place I'd been living the longest. You know, it was like my place. But it would have been easier to just leave him there because he was like settled in real well. But so he moved out to his girlfriend's. It was just down the street. I moved my future wife in, and it strained things a little bit. And but at the same time, he was like started playing bass in Super Joint Ritual, you know, with the Pantera dudes. And things were just crazy. Like he was always a real stable, super thoughtful guy, but at that point, I think things were crazy. You know, there was a lot of outside influences, drugs, too much partying.
Did he get wrapped up in the persona of being, an artist now, and like, not the persona of an artist, but getting carried away with getting some recognition and I think all the things that can afford?
And looking back, I would think it's safe to say it was more like other people got wrapped up in that. That's with my perspective, was that people started treating him differently and started treating us differently, and people are always drawn to like the star effect, you know. And I think he really avoided that. He's actually a super down to earth guy, and he never really wanted to. identify with that. He wanted to make a mark musically and a statement of just being himself. And
not living in the shadows of either his father or his grandfather.
It's a tough spot to be in.
Absolutely. I mean, when you come from that kind of family lineage.
He lives in the shadows of two of the legends of country music, and Hank Jr.'s no joke. I mean, the guy's a multi-platinum country artist and huge, so there he is, all these expectations. Everybody had these different ideas. People would be just sort of like pushy, and kind of, it's hard to be around that. I learned that, it's a sort of turbulent waters all the time. It never really settles down. And here I was like starting to feel the urge to settle down, partially because I was always out on the road. And I had got some guys in the band that were like, they were older. These were like superstar guys from, sidemen from way back, but they were basically stuck on the road. You know, it's like that was their life. Yeah. You're 60 now.
You're still doing it because you have to keep doing it. Right.
Yeah. And I just knew from talking to them that they were sort of like, I'm stuck on this bus with you punks. And we would party a little hard, and I saw some guys just be like, not this again. We'd have like really long drive ahead of us, so we'd take acid or something, and I had every light in the bus changed to different colors because I collected lighting gels from backstage at some clubs, and I'm like, put them on the lights. There wasn't even any white lights in the bus. We'd hooked up a bass amp in the back room for, so we could like crank music, and it would just sound like, like insane. And I remember one time we had Terry Clark's sound man, who was an awesome guy. He was like the best sound man ever, but he was kind of like a normal guy. And we were driving from Texas to New York City or something with no break. It's like the next gig is in New York. So we just turned on the party.
How long of a drive is that?
The drive?
Yeah.
About an acid trip. About the length of an acid trip. Like by the time you were burned out and went to bed, and then you woke up and you're like,
it's New York.
But but it was a little different. It took a lot longer for that guy, I think.
Yeah.
Because when he realized what was happening, I just remember him sitting in the front lounge, and he goes, I think he's crying. Because even in your bunk, you're not going to escape this. We're just going up and down the aisle the whole time. Yeah. Doors are slamming. Music's just like cranking in both ends of the bus. Yeah. And, and it's like, I don't blame the guy for being sad.
Sure. Yeah.
But it was not the environment that, for everybody. But right at that point in my life, when things were getting the craziest, then I'd met my future wife, and I remember looking out the window once. I'll never forget it. We were in Piccadilly Circus in London, and there's apartments and stuff around the road that goes around it. And I don't remember where we were heading, but we were going around the circle, and it was 5 p.m. and window after window was like these British families sitting down to dinner.
Right.
Just like the husband, the wife, kids, and then repeat.
Yeah.
It was just like, and then again, and then again. And I was like, it was like normalcy. Like, look, normalcy. And I'm like thinking, I know people think it's cool. Like, oh, I'd like to be on that bus touring with a band, And I was starting to go, I'd like to be in that apartment sitting at that table. And it was a strange situation because I knew if I was in that apartment sitting on the table, I'd see a bus go by with musicians on it and go, I wish I was on that.
Grass is always greener,
yeah. But no sooner did I wish that than that immediately is when I met my future wife. And she was a, Wisconsin woman and family oriented. Sure. And next thing you know, it just flipped into that. It was the weirdest thing. It was like a gift from God, really. It's like, oh, you want that? Here.
Yeah, here it is.
And so
it sounds like you came along at just the right time, too.
It was weird, yeah. And at that time, Hank was, losing some momentum with what we had started, I think, and really into the super joint thing. But then he picked it back up, and he toured for years after I left, which was around 2002 or something.
Okay, is he still out there doing it?
What?
Is he still out there doing it?
He's not. He went off the road probably in 2015 or 14 or 10. I don't know. It's been forever. And he just stopped touring.
Yeah.
He had a good run. I mean, I was paying attention to what they were doing after I left. And he was building on the career and doing lots of good dates.
Lots of things,
had a, ever-growing fan base and stuff.
Right.
But then I think he just burned out. But he always told me, he said, one day I'm not going to be able to sing this death rock crap. And then we'll, take a break and come back and do the old stuff again.
Yeah, all right.
And so maybe that's what he's doing.
Sure.
I talk to him every now and then,
Okay.
back to Nashville and, text.
Yeah, sure. Just check in.
Text every year or two or something like that. But he's a good dude. I've always considered him a really good person and friend. And
great.
He just got stressed out. It's a tough world to be around. And
it's the same.
Super hard being him. It was super hard being his friend because it was like I was the go-to. I was like his right-hand guy, and his mom was always after me to get through to him too. And
oh, wow.
You can't get between a guy and his mom, and she was not always real friendly about it. And it was a tough situation, where you just couldn't navigate it.
Right.
I just didn't know how to navigate it, really. It was like...
So then when you left and then started breaking up and you started investing more in a home life, do you immediately call up Gibson and be like, yo, can I get that? Can I get that custom shop gig back?
No, I never did. I was busy around town and playing a lot because of, the exposure I got with being with him. And, and one of my greatest fortunes was that one of the friends I made there right away was Dave Rowe.
Okay.
Who's Johnny Cash's bass player. Excuse me. And he really befriended me straight away when I got to Nashville, and was just an awesome connection and friend, and so he'd go on the road with Cash and he'd be like, hey, can you cover these dates in this session for me?
Okay.
So I met all these rad people, like kind of subbing for Dave.
Yeah.
He just introduced me to tons of people and was always super supportive and gave me this rad bass, this Baldwin made in Italy. Looks like a Hofner kind of with F holes. And I'd never seen one before.
Yeah.
But he just one day, like at Robert's Western World, he goes, here, Merry Christmas. Handed me the bass. I was like, whoa.
Yeah.
But so he was instrumental too. So I was pretty busy in Nashville, but it was a rough transition kind of because I was really unsure of my own direction. That where are we going with this? Now I'm married, and I've got this new young wife and stuff. And
but no kids yet?
No kids yet.
Okay.
We were still in Tennessee. So I'd always wanted to go back to college and study engineering because my dad was an electrical engineer. So I was inclined to that. I'm like, well, that sounds practical. I should do that.
Yeah.
So I started doing that, and it went really well. I found that going to college after you'd already partied so much was way easier because there was no distractions.
Because you're not trying to be educated and party at the same time. Right.
And people are like, you want to go out? I'm like, nah.
Yeah.
I've been there.
Yeah, done it. Yeah.
I've got that partying handled. So,
yeah, exactly.
So now it was like the challenge was, can I do this well? And so it was much easier. Because I'd gone to college a little before that. So I decided to go back, and I was just like, wow, it's easy to focus now. College isn't so bad if you actually do the work.
Cool.
Instead of just blowing it all off.
Sure. So what kind of engineering?
I was going to go for electrical, which is hard too, because it's, I guess they're all hard. I have a lot of respect for engineering. It's basically, it covers the tough sciences, physics and upper calculus and all kinds of stuff. So, but it was going well, but my wife was just really motivated to move back to Wisconsin, which wasn't something I'd ever considered that I was going to live in Wisconsin.
Sure.
So we did. She talked us into it, and we moved up there, and that was a whole different experience. But I eventually just dropped out of school because I needed to work and started playing again. And got in all these bands. And it turned out there's a really healthy music scene in Fox Valley. Appleton, that's like right between Green Bay and Oshkosh on Lake Winnebago, which is
that's
Lake Winnebago.
I only know that as like an RV.
Yeah. I think it means, I've been told it means stinky water in Indian.
Really?
In like one of the tribes.
So is the RV company from that place?
I don't know, but it wouldn't surprise me because so many things are from there because that's still a manufacturing base. Like where it hasn't collapsed yet. Right. On like Pittsburgh steel mills.
Yeah.
So there's like, they make tons of paper. You can see manhole covers probably out here on the street that say like Oshkosh or something. Really? Like the foundry there. Kohler Toilets is there. We played like their company party. I'm like, weird. It's like, everything's toilet handles.
Yeah, it's kind of a shitty gig, huh?
But it was a good experience. And I ended up in a reggae band, of all things, in Wisconsin with a guy from Fiji named PETA. And the band's still going strong.
Really?
Like a really popular regional group called Unity.
Okay.
And it was fun. And we played year round. I played upright bass mostly and the 5-string and all reggae music.
Yeah.
And we played all over Wisconsin and Northern Illinois and Upper Peninsula and just that whole region. And it was, no one missed a show. I don't think we missed a show because of weather ever. Like we go out in a blizzard and I'd be like, no way anyone's going to show up to this.
And they would.
And the place would be packed.
Yeah.
It would just be, people don't even care in Wisconsin.
Sure.
When I first started dating my wife, I saw people riding mopeds around like
they just
in the winter.
Yeah.
They just got their feet down like training wheels and going, like scooters and shit. I'm like, these guys are crazy, but they don't care.
Yeah.
So it turned out cool.
Okay.
You know, it was and then that just slowly transitioned into living in Wisconsin way too long. Which was 10 years of like, I'm not used to winter, you know. I mean, I'm from Los Angeles, so minus 20 is not really something you.
Yeah, here, your 62 is cold.
Yeah, you're like, oh, I gotta put on a coat. You know, there, it's like minus 20. If you get stuck outside, you might die.
Yeah.
Like, what happened to him? He's blue. So I was dreaming of moving back, you know, and finally we decided, in retrospect, moving there made sense because shortly after we got there, my wife's mom, not shortly, but maybe 8 years after we'd been living there, my wife's mom got cancer and she died very young. And it was really rough. And
sorry to hear that, yeah.
It was hard on my wife because they were really close.
Of course.
And so when I look back, it made sense. It was like a blessing, really. That
you were there for those last, that's good.
She spent a lot of good time with her right up to the end. And at that point, we had kids, and the kids knew their grandma.
They got to meet her and know her, If you'd been out here, then they maybe wouldn't have the relationship.
It would have been much different. Sure. And even in Nashville, I mean, we were just close to the family there. You know, we were just miles apart.
Yeah.
Instead of days. So
then when you move back here, is that when you get back into being a luthier?
The whole time I was always doing the luthier thing to one degree or another.
Okay.
Like I would do it even when we were on the road with Hank. I built a little shop in my house.
Okay.
And we're just doing like I did Dave Rose bass. And people just, you know, word of mouth would come over and And I'd met the local dude, George Chestnut, who was like a legendary old school bass guy.
Okay.
He was real friendly and nice. He's long gone, but then when I moved to Wisconsin, I started really doing it again, you know, and just had like rooms full of basses.
Yeah.
Like the front room of the house was like all basses and you couldn't walk in there.
Okay.
It was just laying everywhere. But
were you like the local guy, like everybody was bringing?
I was like became the guy because I do a setup thing that's unique where I really make the bass play. And once people catch on to that.
What's involved with the setup? Like what's involved with this specific setup?
Well, it's really the shape of the fingerboard and the playability of the instrument. And I learned it. I was inspired by it back in the 80s because I moved from Southern California to Humboldt County to go to school the first time. And Humboldt County is, you know, it's not a focused region. It can be hard to concentrate. You know what I mean?
It's not a focused region.
Yeah, it can be really, focus is a good word.
There's not a lot of academics there.
No, I mean, Humboldt State University is a great school, but there's also Humboldt Bud. And it's just a magical place for a kid that grew up in LA to go up there. And it's like, wow, it was just like, when I was 19, I had dark circles under my eyes and I was stressed out, you know, because I lived in LA my whole life.
Yeah.
And I just felt it. I was like, you know, just on the edge. I was like falling down, ready to snap, something like the movie. And I was like, I got to get out of here. And we met a really cool friend that had been run over by a train. And that's how come I met him. And it's just a bizarre story. I worked at a Pasadena Honda, a motorcycle shop, because that's my other passion is dirt bikes.
Okay.
So one day, because I always went to the liquor store across the street for lunch, you know, to get a sandwich or something. One day, this new guy was working there, and he was like my age, and I'm about 19 or 20 at this point. And he had was missing his left arm. I think.
Oh my gosh.
And he had this tourniquet thing, this like rubber thing with a tube, that was draining it. And like, it was obviously really fresh.
Wow.
So I see this guy day after day, and, I didn't say anything about his arm but after I'd been seeing him for a month, he seemed really friendly and cool guy, and we're getting to know each other. And so I'm like, dude, I don't mean to be rude, but I just got to know what happened. He goes, you really want to know? I go, yeah.
Well, as soon as someone says that, like, of course you do. Like, you really want to know? Like, well, no, I was just making conversation, but now.
Hey, what are you going to say? Nah.
Yeah, now
really.
I have to know.
Get real, dude. I want to know how to
I'm really just trying to buy some gum and a sandwich.
So his answer, I go, yeah. And he goes, okay, let's go in the back. So we go in the back, and he pulls out this pouch, and he's got a big bud and a giant pipe.
Okay.
And he's from Humboldt.
Yeah.
Like, he's from L.A., but he lived in Glendora or something.
Okay.
And he was rehabilitating. That's why he was down there. So he loads this big bowl, and we're like, he's at work. We're both at work. I'm just across the street from the Honda shop where I ran the parts counter and sold motorcycle parts. And he's at the liquor store where he's like the only dude there running this store, like selling whatever they got and making sandwiches. And so we smoked this giant bowl in the back of the store, and he tells me his story. And he's like, yeah, I lived in Arcata and Humboldt, and friends of mine and I used to always hop this train to go to Eureka because there was a liquor store there that would sell us, booze, even though we were kids. So one day he's hopped the train, and he goes, and the last thing I remember was looking up, and all my friends were looking down at me going, dude. And he fell off the train, and it went over his arm and cut it right off. And it was just like, and I'm all baked too. And I'm like, dude.
Yeah.
But anyway, he was like, yeah, it's really cool up there, though. When I'm better, I'm going to go back up, and you guys should come up. And like my best friend, Brad, we were hanging out all the time. And I'm like, you want to get out of here and move to Wisconsin? And move to Humboldt?
Yeah.
Not Wisconsin. But, and he's like, okay. I was real open-minded. So we did. We went up and we visited Dave, and it was awesome. It's like we're in the redwoods, and it was just like, it was a different world than driving to
than anything
or something. Yeah. It was mind-blowingly different. There was just beaches that looked like Ansel Adams, with bluffs and trees hanging over the edge, and plants looked like bonsai trees growing on the cliff. And we were just like, this is awesome. So we did. We moved up there, and we moved in with Dave and slept on his couch and got our place and enrolled in school and started that life. But that turned out to be where my music really started. It was like I had been a musician, and I wanted to play violin, and that's how come this happened.
Yeah.
As my best friend, Stefan Canels, got two best friends, was a violinist in first grade. He was already really good. And I was like, Mom, I want to play violin like Stefan. And she's like, okay. And she made me take piano lessons. I'm like, that's not violin.
Yeah.
But turned out it was a good idea, but still it wasn't violin. But when I get to Humboldt, it turns out there's an awesome music scene there. Like just everything. My first band was this punk rock band called the Schmidt Heads.
Okay.
And it was like 3 girls, 3 guys, and we were just rotten, It was like, the guitar player was really good. He was like the only guy that could actually play in the band. Everybody else was like, the other guitar player was all right. Everybody else was just greenhorns, from hell. And it's like, they came and made me play because they heard I had a bass.
Okay.
Because I moved up there, I had an electric bass.
Yeah, you owned one, so now you have to be one. Yeah.
And I played it a little, and my friend Dave that I was living with was like, yeah, my new roommate, he plays bass. Yeah. And so this car pulls up one day in the driveway, and they're like, they just come walking in, and they're like, hey, you want to be in our band? And I'm like, I don't really play. And they're like, you got a bass, right? I'm like, yeah.
I'm done.
And they're like, no problem. Yeah. It'll be fine. It's just punk rock and stuff. The guitar player will show you what to play. Yeah. So I said, yeah, and we went and rehearsed, and it was like awesome.
Yeah.
And that started it. Like the bug got me, and I was like, okay, I got to get good at this. This is fun. I got to take it seriously. So I started studying and practicing for real, and studying theory, and just got into it. And it turns out that whole area was just unbelievable couldn't have been in a better spot because there was every kind of music. There were players that had left San Francisco, that were jazz guys that were just burned out.
Right.
And wanted to
Something
escape.
else. Yeah.
I just want to live some mellow
quiet life in the mountains
sick of the city. But there was all this talent up there. So there was I played in a funk band, like a really good funk band. Like it's all Parliament and, Maceo Parker, and James Brown.
Yeah.
Very cool band, which is fun as hell to play on a bass,
of course.
And then a country band, a reggae band. Then I got in this jazz band as I started getting better with a guy named Teddy Taylor.
Okay.
And played with him a lot. And it was just eye-opening. It took me all these directions musically, and I just had the enthusiasm at the time to dive into each one.
Yeah, just soak it all up.
Learn it and find people to learn from. And it really I found the more I opened my heart to music, the more doors just opened in front of me. It's I'm convinced that that's the trick, really, is that you got to open yourself to it, and then it opens to you.
Sure.
And you've got to just surrender almost. So I said yes to everything. People were like, "You want to play in the horn band?" It's we play a bunch of Dixieland horn music, And I'm like, "Sure,
let's do it. Let's do it."
And then there was a little local music store called Wildwood Music that was just awesome little place, and I always was hanging out there.
Yeah.
And the guy I was playing a bass I really liked, the Music Man bass. I think this bass is rad. And the owner looked like Dennis the Menace's dad from the comic strip, he looks like with the glasses and the dark hair from the real old comic strip. Most people probably might not remember that, but so I was like, this bass, it could play a little better. He goes, well, do you want to take it in the back and adjust it? I'm like, sure. Yeah. My policy was to say yes to everything at the time. And I had been apprenticing with a local guitar builder at this point called Moonstone. That was really cool. The guy built a real high-end acoustic guitars with this mind-boggling inlay. And
are they still around?
And he passed away 2 years ago. They have if the website's still up, they have quite a legacy. He was an amazing guy. But he taught me really all the stuff I know to think outside the box and understand Luthier. So I've been working with him. And then the music store was like, you want to adjust this? And I'm like, sure. Next thing I know, I had a job there. And I'm like, they're Luthier. And it turned out cool because everything under the sun came through that music store to fix. Yeah. And weird stuff. Person brought me a sitar and was like, can you turn this into a tambura? I don't even know what you're saying. But I looked it up and I figured it out because I didn't, I said yes to everything. Sure. So, unless it was really weird, but sitar to a tambura, sure. I learned how to do it and I converted this thing. Then this dude brought me a guitar that looked like an armadillo. It was made from an armadillo, literally, an ovation, But they'd made the shell of the armadillo the back of the guitar, and they put a top on it. Yeah. And the guy's like, "It doesn't play that great. Can you make this play better?" And it still smelled a little. I was like, "Sure." Yeah. And then a lady came and she goes, "Can you put jazz chords on my auto harp?" And I'm like, "What?" She goes, "I just want to play." She's obsessive. You meet these people in Humboldt that are just they're so into what they're doing. They're a Renaissance person. They live in the forest. Yeah. And they're, they've been doing this 30 years. Steve from Moonstone, he goes, "Yeah, this woman has a feather dulcimer. She plays it with a feather." I'm like, "What?" I guess that's a thing. So I became really open-minded. So anything goes.
So whatever people are doing.
So I made her jazz chords for the auto harp. I bought new felts, and figured out how to tune it. Cut the filts so they played these different chords. Sure. I couldn't even do it now if I tried. I don't know what I was thinking. But I figured it out. And she goes, "This is amazing." And so she had that. And so that living in Humboldt was just really a growth period in every direction possible. That's musically, Luthier-wise. But the final step that took me to bass Luthier was that I went to go to my bass teacher's house. There was a really good player in town named Craig Whips, who's passed away now. And he was a classical and jazz guy. And if there was a really good show going on, there was a good chance he was going to be on the bass. Right. And he was just had a level of authenticity about what he did. You're like, yeah, this guy knows what he's doing. Sure. And so I go to my first lesson at his house in Arcata. I've got an old K bass at the time that I bought from Trevor Dunn from Mr. Bungle.
Okay.
Because they lived in town. Okay. And they were local kids, and they rehearsed at my house and got me evicted. Because they had a party while I was out playing, and cops came, and everybody came, and the next day the landlord was like, "You boys are out.
Everybody's going.
You're out. This is it." Because she was already fed up with us. Everybody always pissed at us because there was always bands there. And so she kicked us out, but I bought this bass from Trevor, and it was this old K, and it was like hard to play. I didn't know any better.
Yeah.
It was just like bad setup.
Sure.
And everything. So I go to my first bass teacher's house, and I play his bass. He had this beautiful looking old dark German bass or something. And as soon as I start playing it, I'm like, this isn't right. It's just like plays itself. It feels like butter. It's just so easy. And he goes, well, that's Bob Doherty's work. He goes, you're friends with his son, Jeff. And I'm like, really? And so it turns out Bob Doherty's this legendary bass luthier that's worked all over the world and worked in New York City and was really big and long-term in LA and had kind of changed the sound of like TV bass and stuff because his work was like, you know, he was doing the work for all those guys that were doing those recordings, you know, playing with Hal Blaine and stuff. And
sure.
Kind of this sound of the upright that growled and sustained and went, wah, you know, and it just opened my eyes. I'm like, I didn't know bass could play like that. And then I met Bob, and you know, and I'm still really good friends with Jeff, his son, and Bob through Jeff.
Yeah.
But Jeff's an awesome guy we talk to a lot. But he enlightened me about, you know, bass lutherie and how much different it could be. He was so good at it, and he was also a spectacular player, and he was always up there visiting his kid. Okay. And he'd do local gigs when he was there, and he was so good. You know, he would go around the world playing with operas and playing jazz, and
nice.
He did all the work for Ray Brown and his bass, and would cover for Ray and stuff. And it was just world class. Like, you know, just like you sit there and you're just humbled. Yeah. Like the guy's exuding something you don't know how you ever could get. Right. You know, it's just like, wow, this is hardcore shit. And he was so awesome to watch play. Like, I remember one thing that changed my approach to bass playing, because he was taking a solo and he had a kind of a younger band, because there was a lot of talent in that area, and sometimes you could throw together a jazz band. There'd be a few guys from the university and maybe an older guy that's experienced and a couple young kids that are, you know, sharp players. Yeah. So he starts taking a solo, and nobody really comes down and gets quiet. They're like, you know, they're playing with him and, you know, and staying loud, and he just stops and he goes, and you could have heard a pin drop, you know, because everybody was just like, yes, sir. Yeah. And everybody stopped, you know, and he told me later, he goes, I spend the entire night, all day, all week, all year accompanying everybody. He goes, when it's my turn, I want my turn. Yeah. I want to be able to hear it. Sure. And he had this very serious look, and I was just like, no wonder everybody just was like, stop. Yeah. And I never forgot that, because I was like, that's so important. It's like, you've got to give the bass the space. Sure. Because if you're trying to take a solo and you're trying to build something that's, you know, contrapuntal or something, and the drummer's playing the same way, then you don't really have anything to play off of, and there becomes nothing special about what you're trying to do. Or you're forced to just try to hammer out a bass line, which is what you've been doing all night. Right. And so you really want almost the band to disappear, like just, you know, like you hear a hi-hat and you hear a little comping, some good comping.
Ton of sensitivity, yeah.
Yeah, and it's so important. And then the bass solo can be developed. You know, you need like a dark canvas for the bass to stand out against. And I never forgot that, and try to always incorporate that. And not quite like Bob, you know, I don't stop. But if you're just being buried alive, you know, you have to speak up and look. Come on, guys. If there's a single horn player, he's not going to be able to resist playing over everything on your solo. Right. Unless he has someone to talk to nearby. Yeah. Then he'll stop. So you almost want him to have a friend like, hey, that chick's looking at you. Yeah. You know, and then he'll be over there talking to you.
Well, now there's cell phones. Now they just blow their cell phone.
Yeah. So, I don't know.
So he was instrumental, no pun intended, in getting you into bass lutherie.
Yeah, good fun. Yeah,
it wasn't intended.
He was really so good at what he did. Like, he would it all started to me in my mind. I was like, what's this guy doing? He's playing on the fingerboard differently.
Okay.
And he had a shape that he, would do all of the old school playing. And you could just tell when he had done a bass, it was
almost like a signature.
It was night and day different. It was like, wow, this thing is just incredible. And I learned to recognize his little signature work about how he touched the bridge and stuff. And I was at the Pasadena Symphony one time because my mom and dad were big supporters of that and were like patrons to the symphony and had season tickets. So I went one time and spotted a bass on stage. I was like about 22 down here visiting my parents, and they took an intermission, and my dad and I were up there looking at the instruments and everything. The bass player was still holding his bass, one of them. And I go, hey, that's Bob Doherty's work. And the guy looked at me all perplexed. He goes, how do you know?
Yeah.
And I go, I could just see it.
Really?
He goes, you're right.
Yeah. What was it? Was it something on the bridge or was it the bridge? Okay.
And then, once that got my eye, I noticed, the fingerboard seemed a little different. Like nobody would probably see it, but I became real sensitive to it. So I could see and enough to like boldly ask the guy.
Right.
He goes, yeah. So it was very pervasive what he did with basses. And I started learning it and copying it. And most of it was what I learned through other basses.
Okay.
More than Bob directly, because in Humboldt, he had at one time or another fixed 2/3 of the basses there.
Sure.
And then they would eventually come to me, because I was the local guy now in the shop.
Yeah.
And I'd spot his work.
So you were just seeing it come in all the time.
Yeah, and I'd study it and really look at it. And then finally, I got to work with Bob.
Okay.
And, which was great because I had all these questions about things. And then I finally had him in person to answer questions in my shop, and we were working together on basses.
Okay.
And that really put, the final understanding. And there's just, probably mountains of stuff that he does that I don't know, but I was able to glean a lot. And between that and the old Moonstone guitars,
just kind of all coming together.
I just kind of put it all together and kept going forward with it. And people kept bringing me basses, because I was getting good enough at it that it was making a difference. And the word had spread, and then I got good at it. And finally, it got to the point where I started meeting people that said, hey, I tried to call Bob and they're retired, but they said to go to you. Okay. And I was like, yes, it made my day the first day I heard that.
Okay.
So I figured I must be doing something right.
Yeah. How'd you get into building the extensions?
The extensions, it was at the first Lemur.
Okay.
Really, I'd been aware of extensions, but I needed to start making some because there was a request for them. Mm-hmm. And at the time, also, I want to give props to Lisa Goss, who's LA Bass Works.
Absolutely. Yeah.
She's awesome, and I've known her for years.
Yeah, she's done some fantastic work on my bass.
She's really, really an artist and a nice person. And
yes.
My mom took me to meet her when she worked in Glendale at like Metzler's.
Yeah, Metzler Violin.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I was like 18 and didn't even know like what was going on.
I didn't even know that she did actually. I've only known LA Bass Works. Since I've been in LA Bass Works is just
they're the place to go.
Yeah.
And so at Lemur, we were making parts for her. Like the machine shop part, we were making these metal pieces.
Okay.
And also blanks of ebony. And at the time, the old owner had told me that, this was Lemur's design and we're making it for Lisa. But I later found out it was like Lisa's design and we were making it for Lisa.
You was manufacturing her design for her.
Yeah. So, but I was not informed about that or anything, but so there were very many similarities in mine to hers. Okay. And I've gone my own direction with some of these parts. I've invented a way to make these totally different, and it's unique only to what I'm doing. But I also want to give her props for being a really good inspiration. Sure. For where my thing with those headed, because like stuff like the adjustability of the capos for tuning. Okay. Is that on that side? This was stuff that she was doing originally. And so I kind of took it a little different direction as it evolved. With it. But but I want to give her props for.
That's these.
So yeah, you can loosen these
here.
bolts and slide it forward or back, because I use a math formula that I worked out to project where they are, because there's a formula for figuring out where frets are.
Sure.
But I couldn't figure out anything to project it this way. Like, I only know the scale length, but I want to know where this ends up and where this ends up and where this ends up. But it's a subtractive formula to figure out where the next fret is. You multiply with this. So we just kind of went.
What is that algorithm? I'm curious.
It's 17.171 or something. It's
really.
I don't know the exact decimal. I've got it written down. But anyway, so you measure the scale length. You multiply it by that. You subtract the product, and then you measure the new distance, and you do it again, and that determines the frets, the gradient of how they go.
So that's I don't know if that shows up on the camera, but that's a little Allen wrench and a slider to move the lever. You were calling it a cable moves.
And the reason you got to do that is, believe it or not, there's a huge difference brand to brand of strings, and I wouldn't have believed it if I hadn't seen it now. But I've made probably 80 or 100 of these things, and I've discovered that sometimes the string will be very different where it tunes up, and it won't necessarily be like this gap is bigger and this gap's bigger. There's a strange thing, like this distance to here is smaller than that on this particular bass. That shouldn't make sense, right? It shouldn't. It'd be like your F fret being closer to the F sharp, but then suddenly it goes ahead and keeps a
because
pattern.
the same spacing doesn't.
I would think it'd be predictable. Like this is going to be bigger, this will be bigger, this will be bigger, and this will be bigger still. But you can see right here, even on this bass, it's not.
Okay. So these are all in position for tune.
This thing's in tune now, and so my formula works really well, and it puts the notes right in the center of the slots, or the slots in the center of the notes, basically. But then you need a little leeway, like if you change from a tomastic to a parastro or a permanent string or something.
Whatever the string difference is will change the
just by the brand. Be the same diameter and almost similar construction, but you'll go, wow, it's tuning up differently, because it's just a physical phenomenon. And lately, there's those guys that are making those frets for guitars, that are temper tuned. I forgot what their company's called, but they pop up on Instagram all the time now. Okay. And instead of straight frets, the frets go like this. And each fret.
I've only seen the fanned one.
Yeah, this thing will blow your mind. It's it's basically. It doesn't look like it should work. Yeah, the sand makes me nervous because it's a little slippery.
I mean, it's in there, but
there's no earthquake stuff.
Well, fingers crossed.
But so that when I saw that guy's frets, I go, hey, that kind of explains, that things aren't as straightforward as you're led to believe.
Sure.
And tuning's a big issue. Like, so on an electric bass, this is all adjustable. It's like the bridge each saddle will be in a spot because the frets are all straight.
Right.
But this is compensated. Yes. And on a double bass, this is straight.
Yeah.
So you don't know it, but a good player actually learns to compensate everything, and you're actually not playing straight across ever. You're playing where the note is correct.
Right. Yeah, I've never thought about that.
For the piano. It's what because if you look at the bass's main job, it's to play on a classical stage with an orchestra. That was
the fundamental.
That's what it did most of its life, and its predecessors, or the cello and the violin too. They all played in that setting and then evolved from that.
Sure.
So you're constrained to that piano, which has become very sophisticated with its tempered tuning, and it's a constant. It doesn't change. No one retunes the piano during the orchestra break or anything. They might touch it up actually, but they don't. It's tempered and it's tuned the way it is. So everybody in that orchestra is actually playing to that.
Sure.
The best players do it just so naturally and easily that you don't hear any problems. But what they're doing is they're compensating, and everything is all different. And then the notes are their art. They're not science, really. I mean, there's a science behind what a string does, and I think it's cool because it's done that since the first string ever.
Yeah.
Like wherever the first string ever happened in the universe, it operated the same way. It had an octave in the middle, and it had the notes, and it's kind of
overtone series is a mathematical.
Yeah, but within that, it's back to art, you know.
Sure.
It's like it's not everything isn't perfect. The 12-tone scale is not perfect. It's a matter of making it pretty.
Right.
You know, it's like if you tuned the piano perfectly in C, mathematically correct, it would play as you went further away from that key center, it would sound worse and worse until it was just terrible.
Yeah, you get to the tritone F sharp G flat, then it's not going to have
be just like clank.
Yeah.
So it's really about the art of tuning it so that it makes everything nice.
Yeah.
You know, where you enjoy it, and it's like you appreciate the sound of it, but it's not about perfection. And I think that's a discussion I've had with some of my younger clients who are really, really good, you know, going to top music schools and stuff. And then at one point in their music, they start hearing, you know, their ear is so developed, they start hearing problems. They just hear like, nothing's in tune. I can't get this in tune.
Yeah.
Nothing's in tune. And so I have this like conversation sometimes that it's never going to be.
Right.
You're going to have to look at it differently. If you're seeking perfection, it's a dead end street. You're going to have to seek the art instead. Yeah. And usually they all go, yeah.
Oh.
It's liberating, really. It's
sure.
like, make it sound good. Don't think about it so much,
right.
You know? Because you can get real obsessive. A guy that obsesses enough to become a really great player can go down the rabbit hole in other directions and obsess on things that take him off track.
Of
you
course.
know? Like a guy will come over and go, this bass just makes this sound, you know, when I do this. Yeah. I'm like, do you ever do that when you're playing? No.
Yeah.
But it does this, you know? And
but when I do this thing, it does, yeah.
You know, and I want to get rid of the sound for him, but I also noticed that you're dwelling on it. You know, you found this one thing that's wrong, and everything else is music.
Sure.
Like instead of playing the music, you're just fixated on that problem.
Right.
That's all in your head. You got to escape that. So
you get called a lot to do the extensions, and you also get called a lot to convert basses into road basses.
Yeah.
This is something I recently learned that you do. So you could take a bass that's not a flyaway bass or not a portable travel bass and create one out of that. Talk about that process.
There's a guy out there that's on tour a lot right now, Jeff Denson. He's a jazz player from Berkeley, and Berkeley, California. And he's always touring everywhere. And he brought me a bass early on. First of all, I should say that the travel bass idea here, this particular design, started at Lemur. And the old owner, who was also an engineer, was really instrumental in coming up with some clever features. You know, like this has a pivot built in here. It's like a half round. You can't see it on this bass, but it's a half round of aluminum. And then the neck itself in the heel has a notch cut into it. And it has a solid reinforcing bar and the bolt going through it. So it pivots. When you adjust this bolt right here, it affects the pitch of the neck.
Yeah.
And the projection of the fingerboard where it's aiming, which is a really neat adjustment. But you take this bolt out, loosen the strings, and then take the bolt out, actually. And the neck comes out, and it all goes in the box. There's
a road piece over there in the corner.
Which is basically just barely tall enough to hold the body.
Yeah.
And much more manageable than the extra 2.5 feet of bass sticking out.
Sure. So, and weight-wise, I believe they're just under the weight.
Yeah.
For the TSA. And
we need to come up with a new box design to stay there, I think, because at the old shop we had this cool guy that was a specialist at making them, and he obsessed on it and really created this the box. Actually, the box is one of the tricks, and basically the old box was corrugated plastic, like looked like cardboard. But it was super light and surprisingly durable because it could get crunched and dented and bent, and it would never just break. It would just have lots of wear and tear.
Yeah.
And there's guys out there like Stanley Clark and Christian McBride's bass was just here, and his box is just like, damn, that thing's been everywhere.
Yeah.
It's just the only thing holding it together is stickers. But, I mean, it was still holding together, and like I did a little upgrade on it few weeks ago and worked on his bass because it had a couple pieces that were coming loose, and he's back on the road with it, and the thing just takes a beating and keeps going. Like having the neck come out makes the bass a lot safer to travel.
Sure.
because that's one of the things that breaks. It's under the pressure, it's long, it's fragile, too much leverage, and once that breaks, you're not playing that bass anymore on that tour.
Right.
You got a problem.
Right.
So it's a huge advantage. But on people's basses where you do the transition, like Jeff Denson's bass, is a really neat old Bussetto, and I don't remember what it was. It's a Czech bass, a very nice bass. I don't know what it was. But it, removed the neck and put in the mechanism and set it up. And we do a thing where we put a little pin in the sound post once it's in a really good spot. And then it's got a tiny foam donut on the back, and that keeps the post in place when the pressure's off, because that's when the post can fall and also ruin your tour. Right. And it's easy to change, but I go to a lot of effort to make sure it's in a really good spot before you put it in, pin it in and stuff. And then that has the added advantage that the post never moves again. So I think the bass develops a memory around that a little bit and settles, and
the wood's going to adapt to it all.
And usually if it already sounds good, it'll just sound better and over time as it stays there.
And I feel like even that's just a good thing to have on a bass that's being transported a lot locally, even if you're flying with it or not. Like,
it's true.
I transport my bass regularly, and it's like I always have to get my sound post kind of. Yeah. I have to check in with the sound post pretty regularly. Move. Yeah.
And so it's been kind of a lesson for me understanding that people are able to take their bass apart and put it back together correctly and have it still sound good and play right. Because sometimes people are so, lost when the bridge gets bumped and they're just like, it's all screwed up. So it's actually good for the player. Like on the travel bass, we'll put a box. I'll draw it with a ballpoint pen or something so you can't even see it. Like these have boxes around them.
Okay.
But
so you know where to set your bridge.
If the bridge is in the right spot, you can't even tell. But if you see the box, then it's
it's a little off. Yeah.
And the necks can adjust side to side. Also, you can change the pitch and the angle that it's pointing. So you can really fine tune a bass that's been converted to be perfect. You can address a lot of issues with a bass. Like my own personal bass is about an 1890s unknown German builder that's really fell by the wayside and it was in bad shape. And had a 43-inch neck, like the nut was like here. Yeah. And it was an E-flat neck, which I don't particularly like because I'm not that used to them, but it was so long. And it had no overstand, which is the part here that sticks out from the body, which is important, especially if you're playing arco, because if you imagine that this neck were moved back that way, most of this distance, then when you're bowing, now suddenly this whole unit is much closer and you end up with a lot less room to operate. Yeah. You hit the sides. It also affects the geometry of the bass because this is got to match, so that your bridge ends up at a centered angle and it's not like flat here and really steep here. Sure. Because that makes the bridge want to go places. And
it's going to pull it in either direction.
And it affects the sound, too, because this is leverage on the instrument that's involving it. Like, and to visualize that, imagine if this whole unit was this long. Yeah. So this is like 1.5 feet long. Imagine the amount of force that this string tension would be pulling downward on this top and levering this into that, like squeezing it. Yeah. So that makes a difference in the tone and the energy of the instrument, too. So when you do a conversion, it's an opportunity to fix all of that. So on my old bass, I had the good fortune of Ron Carter having a flyaway bass. Mm-hmm. And something happened to his neck, and it developed some little cracks in the heel. So I made him a new neck, and I kept the old neck. And it had the fingerboard on it and everything. And I was like, wow, this neck would fit in my old bass and solve all my problems, because it would change it to a 41. I was like brainstorming. I'm like, okay, let's do that. So I turned my old bass into a travel bass.
So you have Ron Carter's old neck.
I got Ron Carter's old neck. And it's a 41-inch scale now, and it's a D neck, and it's Ron's old neck. And I'm like, rad. Yeah. And it changed everything, and I was able to bring the overstand out because my old bass had none. You could barely put like a pencil.
Oh, wow.
It was all wrong. So now it's all right.
Cool.
So it's a bass might be a good candidate that had some problems, and you'd be able to correct it.
Yeah,
turn
really
it
kind of get it into shape.
Really winning bass. And like Jeff Denson said about his, that he liked it better now than before we converted it.
Oh,
He thought it sounded better, and it's real adaptable. Like this wrench, you can adjust on the fly. And when Ron plays, this is his bass right here, actually.
Yeah, I was playing it a little earlier.
And that's his West Coast travel bass. Can I bring this over here? Or
Yeah.
put this on the camera? And this is all set up how he likes it.
Yeah.
And it's got his strings on it, his signature strings that he plays. Needs a little tuning. But anyway, he'll adjust this on the fly. Like I watched him at the Catalina Club and brought him this bass, and he played it for his whole engagement there. And he'll pull the wrench out of his pocket and just give it a little tweak, like right in the middle of the show, and it just barely makes it go out of tune. It's just so little that you just fine tune it a little and you're fine. And he loves that feature about it, even though he didn't have to fly out here from New York with this one, he still wanted to use this bass because he can instantly make it feel right for him, and keep it there. So it's a very cool instrument, it's a cool design. So since I've taken over making them, it's when I joined Weimer, it was in 2014. And it was thanks to Dave Rowe again from Nashville, because I was like, Dave, I can't take Wisconsin anymore. It's 20 degrees here, it's minus 20. And he's like, I'm thinking of moving back to Nashville. He goes, don't bother. This town sucks. It was like Nashville had become Vegas, and he's like, you won't like it anymore. The old Nashville you lived in was, it's gone.
Man, think of the past.
So I was like sad. I was like, darn. What am I going to do? He goes, you still bass Luthier, right? Doing bass Luthier. And I said, yeah. He goes, I know a shop in Southern California that needs you.
Great.
And so he called Weimer and talked to the old owner and told her about me. And he goes, yeah, she really wants to meet you. So she flew me out here.
Okay.
And it was just really intense. It was the weirdest time. My wife was pregnant, about 7 months pregnant with her third child. Her mom had just passed away like barely a year before this. I get to Weimer, and it's owned by a couple, Tony and Jerry. And Jerry was sick with cancer at the time I got here, and this was part of the problem. And they had no Luthiers. They had stuff that was been sitting here for a while, and people were getting stressed, And Jerry was on his deathbed, and I remember Tony going, "Oh, you'll meet Jerry." And then Joel, the manager, goes, "Jerry died today." And
oh my gosh.
Okay.
Oh my gosh.
It was like,
that's heavy.
It was heavy. It was all heavy everywhere we went. And I felt like, oh, this is insane. I can't come out here with my pregnant wife and move my entire life back to the West Coast. But I really, really wanted to, because my mom is here.
Yeah.
She's not getting any younger. And I felt really like I need to be out here, but I don't know what to do. And I was at Laguna Beach with my friend Tom, where I was staying while I was out here doing the work. It's kind of like my test.
Yeah.
My trial by fire. I came out here and fixed all the problem bases they had in about a week. Just like hauled ass through them. But I was sitting on the beach watching Tom surf, and I was like, this is never going to work. What am I dreaming? I'm smoking crack. This is ridiculous. And then it was like a voice came into my head and just sort of slapped sense into me. He goes, "You're from Southern California. Your grandfather's buried right there. His ashes are in between Newport and Laguna."
Okay.
And it's like, if you don't belong here, you don't belong anywhere.
Yeah.
It just sort of like, I was like, no kidding.
Man.
That's a fact, I'm like multi-generational Californian. And so I called my wife. I go, let's do it. It was like in that scene in The World According to Garp where the plane hits the house and he'll go, "We'll take it." They go, "Really? Why would you want it?" He goes, "It's pre-disaster.
Yeah.
It's only up from here." And I kind of felt the same way. I'm like, everything's so, challenging that it's only going to get better. We got no choice but to rise to challenges all around us and get the game on.
Yeah, just say yes.
And she said, yeah, let's do it then. So I said yeah to the job, and a couple months later, we loaded up the moving van and we headed out.
Cool, man.
And it was a neat, experience. And then I learned how these were a thing. And there was no one making them anymore at the time because they didn't have any Luthiers or anything. So I picked up the ball again on this and altered them a little bit, changed a little bit, few things, that make them sound better and easier to make.
Yeah.
Started using carbon fiber in here instead, and reinforced the neck with carbon fiber so that it wouldn't change on the road. Okay. Because that was a problem, because these things spend a lot of time in like airplane baggage holds, which is cold and dry, and things would happen in there. Necks would change and crack or just, go bad, basically. Sure. So I overcame all those problems.
Jason, thanks so much for doing this, man.
Huh?
Thanks so much for doing this. We're about out of time.
It's a neat thing. And I mean,
I'm glad you were able to talk about it.
The thing I like about these basses is that they sound like a regular bass.
Yeah. Sounds good.
Beyond like not sacrificing anything, because like it's a travel bass, but it's not quite as good as my main bass. They end up being your main bass.
Sure.
Most of the people I know with these, when they're not on the road, they keep them together and they're still gigging with it.
Yeah, of course.
Whether they're a converted bass or whether they're, this is one where we were always getting the same product of a hybrid bass with a carved top and plyback and sides, built to the specs and delivered unfinished. I mean, it had the finish, varnish on it, but the neck was out, the fingerboard was off, nothing was together, so it just converted it at that point into being one of these originally. It starts its life as this, like this one did. But they're so neat. They're like, why not just have a travel bass? It's like it feels as good as any bass, except you can adjust it instantly.
Yeah, you just have more control over it.
And so it's a fun thing. So that's, since we're back here with Tammy in the new Lemur, which I want to add something about. It's been great because I parted ways with the old Lemur a few years ago because it was just got difficult. Mm-hmm. And I think she was really ready to retire, and I was ready for new things. So sure. I ended up at the guitar shop in Laguna Beach, which was a really neat old school guitar builder. Kirk Sand builds some of the world's best classical guitars. And they also are just a great local shop, kind of like McCabe's or something, where they got
that's right around
all
the
time. Yeah, it's a similar vibe. There's always like some famous people cruising the place.
Right. It's got its own presence when you walk in.
Yeah, they've been there since '72.
Yeah.
It's right on the beach practically in North Laguna. And they basically rescued me and put me to work right away, and I became their guitar luthier.
Okay.
But then I realized what was going on is people would call and go, "Hey, I need my bass fixed." They'd call me and I go, "Well, I'm not at Lemur anymore." And they go, "Well, where are you?"
But we'll come to you.
And then they just come there, and pretty soon the guitar shop was filled up with basses. It's a little place, and I'm like, "Oh, this is bad."
Yeah.
I'm overwhelming the shop, so I started my own shop.
Okay.
And got really lucky because all the clients kept coming to me, and then. At the beginning of last year, Tammy took over Lemur T, and asked me if I wanted to get involved again. And I said, yeah, because the T's great. Yeah. She's been there forever, even been through the ringer there and came back and stuff. Sure. And now she's the new owner, and it's a whole new vibe, new location. Yeah. And so we're bringing the Flyaway back. Good. And we just got the first one out to Nathan East, and he took it away last month. Yeah. And so that's kind of my vision, is that we bring this back and add the C extension, because there's a need for students. Like, you've got people that are serious about the bass, and they go to New York City to study now, like for college. Yeah. And then they're always trying to come home. I come home for Christmas. I come home for spring break.
Right.
Do you have a bass we could borrow? How am I going to deal with this? I got to travel with my bass. I got to do all this crap. I'm playing all these basses I don't like. I'm always on a different bass. It's a very hard thing. I don't have a C extension. So
yeah,
I think that this addresses all of it.
You have all of it right there.
So what we're doing is trying to make a more affordable version, and I found a different wood to make C extensions out of, because this one's ebony.
Okay.
And ebony is getting more and more scarce, and that's traditional. But I just made one the other day out of wenge, which is an African hardwood, and it worked great, and it's also about a third the weight. My extensions are super light because the parts are aluminum instead of brass.
Do you notice the total difference when you go from the actual ebony fingerboard into the wenge extension?
It sounded great.
Okay.
I didn't notice anything except that it sounded awesome, and it weighed just nothing. It's like you couldn't tell there was one up there.
Okay.
Which is great for everything and the travel bass.
Sure.
And so I can make it much more affordable for a student because it's a big commitment. But if you're serious about classical music, you really have to have the C extension or a 5-string. And in American classical music, it's really the C extension that's predominant. So I'm really excited about that, and I'd like to, be a game changer where more and more of these students can have a great bass and take it with them on spring break, and take it there on Christmas, and take it with them when they move. Bring it back when they're done or whatever, and just have it be not an issue, and then still be a great orchestra bass. And
where can people reach you? Can lemur.com?
That'd be
Do you have an email address on the website? Or is there a specific one where they can mainline it to you?
I think just the lemur.com, because I'm doing this while most of my Luthier is through my own shop. It's like I'm really specialized in like my own C extensions for clients that come to me or setups. But this is through Lemur. Is a like a Lemur product that I'm making for them or with them. Yeah. And we're trying to advance, like the concept of it and the marketplace for it, so that more and more students are able to have a much more stable bass playing experience, and take it further, because it's not the easiest thing in the world to do. And I think that the nature of it, I've seen it discourage a lot of great players that, get to the point where they're like, do I want to really do this the rest of my life, or do I want to even do this for college? And some of them say,
the whole instrument's a commitment. Yeah.
Yeah. And they played a bass their whole life. They played so hard, they hated it. And they never really had the fun with it that I know they could have.
Sure.
So I won't be here to bring the fun back into the game.
Yeah, man. Yeah. Sick.
So that's where that's at.
Cool, man. Cool. Dude, thanks so much. I got to wrap this up because I got to get to my gig back in LA.
Man. Sorry, I feel like I talked too much.
No. That's all great stuff, man.
All right. That was my talk with Luthier and double bassist Jason Brown. If you are enjoying the Bass Shed podcast, please hit subscribe wherever you are listening to it. I'm also on Facebook.com/The Bass Shed, on Twitter @Bass Shed, on Instagram @The Bass Shed. The YouTube channel is youtube.com/C/The Bass Shed. You can find me on all those places, and there are links to them at thebassshed.com. About thebassshed.com, I'm still wrapping up the funk bass lines of James Brown. I just did some videos on Jimmy Blanton and the solo vocabulary of the legendary Jimmy Blanton. All that is on YouTube and at thebassshed.com, so you can check that out. If you're interested in keeping the Bass Shed podcast happening, you can donate at thebassshed.com/podcast. That just goes to, keeping the lights on, so to speak. Because this all takes time and resources to keep happening. So you can do that along for every donation. I'm more than happy to give a shout out to all the donors on the mic. And so hopefully you guys can, and women, that wasn't gender specific. That was very generic. All the donors, I'll give a shout out on the mic to social media handles so you guys can get some more eyes and ears on what you're doing with music and on the bass. So there's all that. That's about all I got, folks. That's all I got for this one. I will catch you on the next one in a minute.